Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have you ever heard the old adage, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me? Good, because I want you to think about this adage, and I want you to think about whether it's true or not. All thinking? And Helene's shaking her head, so I guess she doesn't think it's true. So I want you to start by remembering a time when someone said something horrible to you. Something degrading. Maybe a boss or mentor told you that you weren't good enough to make it in your chosen field. Or maybe a family member insulted your appearance or your intelligence. Or maybe a partner or someone who you thought was your friend subjected you to verbal abuse. How did that feel? How did it feel in your body? How did it feel in your soul? Could you brush off their words? Or did their words wound you to your core? Now, think about a time when you had the opposite experience. Think about when a relative complimented you on being a hard worker, or when your boss praised the results of a project you were working on, or when a friend told you how kind you were, when a partner said they loved you. I'd imagine this would elicit a completely opposite reaction. You probably felt warm inside. Their words probably made you feel light, like you'd just taken a big, deep breath of fresh air. So see, words do matter. This week, we read Parshat Balak, a Torah portion that is all about words. Balak is a strange parsha in that the entire story happens outside the perspective of the Israelites. Rather, Balak tells the story of an evil Moabite king who becomes afraid of the Israelites and sends a magician, Bil'am, to curse them. God does everything that God can to stop Bil'am from delivering the curse. First, God comes to Bil'am in a dream and tells him not to curse the Israelites. When Balak convinces him to go and curse the Israelites anyway, God sends an angel to scare his donkey and attempt to thwart his efforts. Despite God's best efforts, Balak still manages to convince Bil'am to curse the Israelites. However, when he reaches the first mountain and opens his mouth, a blessing comes out. He ascends a second mountain and tries again to curse the Israelites. But an even more elaborate blessing pours forth from his mouth. So in one final attempt to curse the Israelites, he ascends a third mountain, but instead of cursing the Israelites, he utters his most elaborate blessing yet, beginning with the words, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Anyone recognize these words? Good. I'm glad you do, because they come from our Shacharit service. So those of you who are in our Saturday morning crew would be familiar with them. So it's worth noting that while Bil'am could see the Israelites, they couldn't see him, and they were maybe out of earshot of his curse. It is further worth noting that our tradition does not look favorably upon magic, and Bil'am was, when all is said and done, a magician. According to our sage Maimonides, magic is total emptiness, and one who believes it is a fool. Why then did God go to such great lengths to make sure that Bil'am did not curse the Israelites? First, we must consider what might have happened if the Israelites had heard the curse. They may have attributed significance to the curse, not realizing that it could not cause them physical harm. Furthermore, it could have caused them emotional harm, knowing that someone had cursed them. Medieval commentator Joseph Ibn Caspi writes, "A true friend will save their colleague any pain, even if they know that no danger will ensue." Similarly, the Eternal, out of the abundance of God's love for Israel, prevented Bil'am from cursing them, though God was aware that his curses were impotent. But the Eternal did not rest content with this. God went so far as to make Bil'am bless the people to give them pleasure. In other words, God was so concerned for the Israelites' well-being that God protected them from any harm, not just physical, but also spiritual and emotional, that Bil'am could have caused. Medieval commentator Abravanel offers a different perspective. Bil'am's sorcery was world famous. Balak referred to his own renown when he said, "For I know they whom you blessed are blessed, and they whom you curse are cursed." Had Bil'am cursed Israel, the surrounding nations would have plucked up courage and gone to do battle with Israel on the strength of his curses. But when they heard how God had turned them into blessings, they would realize who is sovereign and would lose all desire to fight God's people. In other words, Bil'am's curse could have caused actual physical harm to the Israelites by causing other nations to attack them. Still, other commentaries state that had Bil'am cursed the Israelites, they could have blamed all future suffering on this curse instead of as a consequence of their own misdeeds, which would release them from all responsibility for their actions. Similarly, if Bil'am had succeeded in cursing the Israelites, Balak could have attributed any future military victories to the curse rather than to sheer luck. All of these commentaries have one thing in common. All suggest that the curse itself could not have harmed the Israelites, but the words of the curse and the act of cursing could have harmed them immensely. In thinking about the power of Bil'am's words, specifically during this last full week of June, Pride Month, I'm reminded of something that many of us here tonight don't have to think about, myself included: pronouns. What do I mean by pronouns? If you're scrolling through a Zoom list of participants, or if you're reading an email, or if, as the pandemic starts to wane, you're attending a meeting or conference where people are wearing name tags, you may see that some people have a little extra something listed next to their names. She, her, or he, him, his, or they, them, their, or even sie, them, their. These are people's pronouns. For example, you'll notice when you see me on a Zoom call or in my email signature that I have she, her next to my name. I realize that this is completely new for some people, and believe me when I say it was completely new for me at one time too. And so at the risk of sounding overly didactic, let me explain. I am a cis woman. That means that when I was born, I was told that I was female, and I identify as a female. And my appearance also conforms to female gender stereotypes. I wear dresses and high heels, though not tonight. I grow my hair long, and I even put on makeup. And so if you were to meet me, you would probably just assume that my pronouns were she and her. However, this is not true of everyone. For many trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people, their pronouns might not be immediately obvious. But calling everybody by their correct pronouns is so important. And that is why it is important to make pronoun sharing a habit. When I share my pronouns, I help to make other people comfortable and safe in sharing theirs. If you are as entrenched in the reform movement's current teachings as I am, you may have heard the term audacious hospitality thrown around pretty much everywhere. Does that sound familiar to anyone, just out of curiosity? You haven't. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about audacious hospitality. So audacious, of course, means bold, and hospitality is, to make people feel welcome. And so audacious hospitality means being bold in our efforts to include everyone in our communities and make them feel welcome. Here is a statement from the Union for Reform Judaism on their Audacious Hospitality Initiative. Audacious hospitality is a transformative spiritual practice rooted in the belief that we will be a stronger, more vibrant Jewish community when we fully incorporate the diversity that is the reality of modern Jewish life. We believe that there is more than one authentic way to be Jewish, and acknowledge that our diversity is an essential component to making our communities whole. So, where do pronouns come into this audacious hospitality? The Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism, which is the Reform Movement's social justice wing, gives us the following alarming statistics. 75% of transgender students feel unsafe in their school and often experience physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. Oftentimes, this results in the youth running away from home. And around 37% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQIA+. So for these people and for a lot of other people, pronouns can literally be a life or death issue. Our Torah teaches us that we are all created in the image of God, but B'Tselem Elohim, and we all deserve dignity and respect. Calling someone by their correct pronouns is a way to treat them as though they are created in the divine image. And lest we think that gender diversity is not present in our classical Jewish texts, the Talmud actually refers to 6 genders. Zachar, a male, Nekava, a female, Androgynos, a person who has both male and female characteristics. Today we would use the term intersex. Tumtum, a person whose sexual characteristics are indeterminate or obscured. Ilonit, a person who is assigned female at birth but later develops male characteristics. And Saris, a person who is assigned male at birth but later develops female characteristics. Modern gender identity is, of course, far more complicated than is expounded upon in the Talmud. But it is still important to note that even early rabbinic scholars acknowledge the complexity of gender. So how does someone feel when they are referred to by an incorrect name or pronouns? My pronouns are usually assumed to be she and her, and I don't have this lived experience. So of course, where do I turn to? I turn to 17 magazine for an explanation. One of my favorite magazines when I was a preteen and a teenager, and there's a reason, and here's what they have to say. Imagine your legal name is Amanda, but your entire family called you by your middle name of Sarah. Every birthday cake, every holiday card, every time your mom yelled at you for texting at the table, all you'd hear is Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. And then you tell a friend one day that your legal name is Amanda, and they say, oh my God, I'm gonna call you Amanda from now on. And you're all like, but I don't go by Amanda. Amanda means nothing to me. In fact, I feel really uncomfortable when people call me Amanda because it's like not my name. If that person insisted on calling you Amanda, I would suggest you go running for the hills. The person in this excerpt feels disrespected and embarrassed, just like the Israelites would have if Bil'am had cursed them. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. What happens if someone refers to you by the correct pronouns? Here are quotes from 2 young people who are GLAD ambassadors on their college campuses and were wonderful enough to share their experiences on the internet. The first is from Samaya Gupta, who uses all pronouns. Pronouns are important to me as a gender-fluid person because they make me feel seen. When I tell people I use any pronouns, they usually default to she, her, because that's when they feel most comfortable referring to me, since I come across as a cisgender woman. I'm okay with she, her pronouns, but whenever people refer to me with other pronouns, it feels like they're saying, I see you and respect your identity. Even though there is no one way to be genderqueer, I often feel like my gender isn't queer enough. I feel a sense of validation from people using different pronouns with me. It also feels so welcoming whenever you enter a new space and people introduce themselves with both their names and their pronouns. It's especially important for cisgender people to take the initiative to set this standard in spaces because as people under the trans umbrella, we don't always know if it's safe for us to do so. And the next excerpt is from Sarah Ondak, who uses they, them pronouns. Pronouns to me are like a hug or a squeeze on my shoulder, something that says, I see you for who you are in your entirety, and I love you for it. When I'm misgendered, it's a stab at my heart. That sounds dramatic, but there's no easy way to describe the whirlwind of disappointment, anger, and sadness that courses through me. But when people use my correct pronouns, it means that on some level, They respect my experience and they recognize this essential aspect of who I am. And if you are in need of additional resources regarding pronouns, you can always go to the pronoun guide on reformedjudaism.org. When we are addressing each other, let us think of Bil'am and how his potential curse on the Israelites became a blessing. Remember that Bil'am's curse would have not caused any harm from a physical standpoint, but it would have caused great harm from an emotional and spiritual standpoint. When we are talking to each other, let us strive to do no harm on any level. Let us treat each other as if we are all made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. And you can pull back up the PowerPoint for just a second. And we read this pride blessing responsively to acknowledge all of the wonderful different souls who are members of our congregation and Jewish community. Makor HaChayim, source of life, you have blessed each of us with your spirit. In your wisdom, you have made each of us a unique treasure. Ma'ayan Chayenu, wellspring of our lives, cause us to flow with courage, strength, and compassion to live our lives openly, proudly, and joyfully. Shekhinah Ahava, present. Ruach HaShalom, spirit of peace and wholeness, open our eyes to the gifts and blessings we offer and receive from each other. Open our hearts to welcome each other fully and truly. Open our hands to embrace, to support, to lift each other, begila, berina, beshalom, uvreut, with joy, with song, with peace, and with deep friendship. Nevarech et Ma'ayan Chayenu Tekadesh Utesameach Otanu Ve'et HaShabbat. We bless you, wellspring of our lives. May you fill us and Shabbat with joy and sanctity. Amen.